The rain started as a gentle whisper, a soft patter against the leaves. Sam adjusted his raincoat, tightening it around his neck. He had always loved camping alone, finding solace in the quiet of the forest. Tonight, however, there was a strange unease in the air, a chill that wasn't entirely from the rain. Sam had set up his tent near a small, isolated clearing, surrounded by towering pines. The forecast hadn't mentioned rain, but he was prepared for anything. As darkness enveloped the forest, he lit a small fire, its flickering flames casting eerie shadows that danced on the wet ground. He pulled out his journal, scribbling notes about the day's hike, the rustling of leaves, the distant hoot of an owl, and the rhythmic drumming of rain on his tent were the only sounds. He found it oddly comforting, a symphony of nature that lulled him into a false sense of security. A sudden crack of thunder shattered the tranquility, making Sam jump. He laughed nervously at himself, shaking his head. "Get it together, Sam," he muttered, but as he settled back down, he noticed something odd. The forest had gone silent. The usual night sounds had vanished, replaced by an oppressive, eerie stillness. Sam's heart began to race. He tried to dismiss it, blaming his imagination, but the feeling of being watched was unmistakable. He scanned the tree line, the fire's glow barely penetrating the thick darkness. Just as he was about to turn away, he saw Ada's shadow, darker than the night, standing between two trees. "Hello," he called out, his voice shaky. No response, just the rain and his pounding heart. The shadow didn't move. He squinted, trying to make out details, but it was just a void, an absence of light. Sam grabbed his flashlight, pointing it towards the shadow. The beam cut through the rain, but when it reached the spot where the shadow had been, there was nothing. He let out a sigh of relief, convinced it was a trick of the light, but the feeling of being watched persisted, gnawing at his nerves. He decided to retreat to his tent, hoping the thin fabric would provide some sense of security. As he zipped up the entrance, he heard a soft whisper, like the wind carrying a voice. He held his breath, straining to listen. The whisper grew louder, more distinct, though he couldn't make out the words. "Who's there?" he demanded, fear creeping into his voice. The whisper stopped abruptly, replaced by a low, guttural growl. Sam's blood turned to ice. He fumbled for his knife, his only weapon, and clutched it tightly. Minutes passed, feeling like hours. The growl had faded, but the oppressive silence remained. Sam's mind raced, trying to rationalize what was happening. He considered packing up and leaving, but the thought of venturing into the dark, rain-soaked forest was equally terrifying. Suddenly, his tent was illuminated by a blinding flash of lightning, followed by an earth-shaking clap of thunder. In that brief moment of light, he saw a figure standing just outside his tent, his face pressed against the fabric. Sam screamed, slashing at the tent with his knife, but the figure was gone as quickly as it appeared. Breathing heavily, Sam peeked out of the tent. The rain had intensified, reducing visibility to mere feet. He couldn't see anything unusual, but the dread remained. He knew he wasn't alone. Something was out there, something that wanted him to know him. He decided he couldn't stay. Gathering his courage, he packed his essentials, leaving the tent behind. With a flashlight in one hand and the knife in the other, he stepped into the rain. The forest seemed to close in around him, every shadow a potential threat. As he trudged through the mud, he heard footsteps behind him, barely audible over the rain. He spun around, flashlight sweeping through the darkness, but saw nothing. He quickened his pace, the footsteps matching his speed. Panic set in, his mind filled with images of unspeakable horrors. He stumbled over roots and rocks, the rain blurring his vision. The footsteps grew louder, closer, until he could almost feel hot breath on his neck. Suddenly, he broke into a clearing, the rain momentarily easing. In the center stood an old, decrepit cabin, its windows dark and foreboding. With no other options, he sprinted towards it, praying for refuge. The door creaked open, revealing a musty, dilapidated interior. He slammed it shut behind him, sliding a heavy beam across to secure it. The footsteps stopped outside, replaced by a scratching at the door. Sam backed away, heart racing, as the scratching turned into pounding. He found a corner and sank to the floor, clutching his knife and flashlight. The pounding grew more insistent, more desperate, as if whatever was outside knew he had nowhere left to run. A final, thunderous crash sent the door flying open. Sam's flashlight flickered and died, plunging him into darkness. He heard the creature enter, its guttural breathing filling the room. He held his breath, every muscle tensed. In the pitch black, he felt a cold, clammy hand grasp his shoulder. Sam screamed, slashing with his knife, but his hand met only air. The creature laughed, a sound that chilled him to the bone. "You're mine now," he whispered, his voice a rasping hiss. The last thing Sam saw was a pair of glowing red eyes, filled with malice and hunger, before everything went black. The rain continued to fall, washing away all traces of Sam's presence, leaving the forest silent once more.